Hey guys, hey everybody. So I am out again today. I have COVID, so I am hoping that my fever goes away in the morning so I can be back with you all on Friday. But I know you guys were getting tired of Ed Puzzle and listening to that, so I decided that I would record our story because next week we will be finishing up with the Wild Robot and we'll be getting something new after fall break. So, join with me. This is basically nighttime reading by Miss Amanda. The autumn. The days were getting shorter, the air was getting crisper, and one morning Roz walked out to find a layer of frost on the garden. Autumn had come to the island, and right now we're about to start autumn, so there's a connection for us. The tree leaves, which had been green for the robot's entire life, turned yellow and orange and red. Then they let go of their branches and floated down to the ground, and the forest gradually filled with the sounds of creatures scurrying through dead leaves. Tree nuts were also falling, thunking onto roots and rocks and occasionally clanging off our robot. The smell of flowers faded as blossoms withered. All the rich scents and colors of the island were draining away. The animals were also changing. Furry animals were growing more fur, feathery animals were growing more feathers, and scaly animals were starting to look for new homes. Yup, it's cooling off, croaked one frog to another. Before long, it'll be time for sleeping. Yup, I better start looking for a good hole, croaked the second frog. Have you found one yet? Nah, croaked the first frog. I'll look for a hole next week. For now, I'm going to enjoy this warm sunlight while it lasts. Yup. Many of the island animals were already thinking about their winter hibernation. Frogs, bees, snakes, and even bears would soon disappear and spend the next few months resting out of sight. And then there were the birds. Some birds, like owls and woodpeckers, would spend the winter nesting and eating the island's few remaining edibles. But the migratory birds were preparing for their long journey south to the warm wintering grounds. And among the birds destined to leave were the geese, which I brought a special friend. Here is Brightbill, and he is with me. Brightbill slowly waddled into the nest. He had a confused look on his face. Mama, the other goslings said that we have to leave the island soon, and we won't return for months and months. Is that true? This is true, said Roz. You know that geese migrate south for the winter. Will you migrate with us? Said Brightbill. I cannot fly or swim, so I will spend the winter here on the island. Can I stay with you? I do not think that is a good idea. I think you should migrate with the flock. How long will the migration take? Said Brightbill. Where will we fly? When will we come home? I do not know, said Roz. Let us go ask the others. And so the robot and our gosling walked around the pond. Hello, everyone, said Roz. Brightbill has some questions about the flock's upcoming winter migration, and we'd be happy to answer them, said Loudwing. What would you like to know, little one? How long will the migration take? Said Brightbill. Where will we fly and when will we come home? Well, it'll take us a couple of weeks to fly south, said Loudwing, depending on the weather. We'll join other flocks at a beautiful lake in the middle of a great sprawling field, said another goose. And we'll come back to the island after 4 or 5 months, said someone else, depending on the weather. As they walked back to the nest, Brightbill said to his mother, Lately I've been feeling this strong urge to fly, not just around the pond or the island, but to go on a long flight, kind of like a journey. Those are your instincts, said the robot. All animals have instincts. They will help you survive. Do you have instincts? Said the gosling. I do have instincts. They help me survive also. My instincts are definitely telling me to fly south for the winter. I just wish you could join us. I'm going to worry about you while I'm away. Do not worry, I will be fine, said Roz. How bad could winter be? Chapter 53 The Migration. It was the night before the migration, and Brightbill was sleeping fitfully. Roz watched him toss and turn until he finally crawled up into her arms, and she just rocked him to sleep, just like the old days. Early the next morning, Brightbill waddled outside and looked at the pond. The water was perfectly still. A few lazy clouds had gathered above. Geese were already gathering at the beach. and then tiny claws scampered down to the treetops. "So, today's the day, huh?" said Chit Chat, perched on a branch. "You're going to go see so many new things and meet so many new animals, and if there are any squirrels at your wintering grounds, please tell them that Chit Chat said hello." "Today is the day," said Bright Bill. "The flock will be leaving soon. Are you excited? Are you nervous? Are you scared?" "I'm all of those things," the squirrel whispered. "Well, don't worry about your mother. I'll look after her so you know she'll be perfectly fine." Bright Bill smiled. "I'm afraid it's time to go," said Roz as she stepped out of the nest. "Okay, Mama," said the gosling. "See you in the spring, Chit Chat." "Have a nice migration, Bright Bill." The squirrel scampered back into the treetops. "Come home with lots of exciting stories, but not too exciting because I don't want anything scary to happen to you. Okay, goodbye." The geese were honking with excitement. "There you are, Bright Bill," Loudwing honked from the middle of the crowd. "We're just about to begin." "May I have your attention, please?" said the biggest goose. "As most of you know, my name is Longneck, and I'll be leading this year's migration. I'm asking everyone to please join your family for takeoff. Once we're all airborne, each family will take its position in our V formation, and we'll start the first leg of our journey. Are there any questions?" "I have a question," came a booming voice. "My son will not have a family with him. Where does he fit into the formation?" Everyone turned to Longneck. "He can fly with me," said the big goose. "I hear Bright Bill is a good flyer. I could use his help at this point." A moment later, the geese began flapping and honking and making their way into the air. A cloud of feathers floated down around the robot and her son. "You are not a gosling any more," said Roz. "I am proud of the fine young goose you have become." Bright Bill fluttered up to his mother's shoulder. "Thanks, Mamma." The young goose wiped his eyes. "Is this where we say goodbye?" "This is where we say goodbye for now, but spring will be here soon, and we'll be together again." "I'm going to miss you," said Bright Bill as he nuzzled his mother. "I'm going to miss you too," said Roz as she nozzled her son. The geese took a deep breath. Then he shook his tail feathers, flapped his wings, and joined the flock. At first, the geese flew in an unorganized, disorganized jumble, but each goose slowly drifted into position until the flock formed a wobbly V. At the lead was Longneck, and behind his left wing was Brightbill. They circled in the sky until the V pointed south, and then the geese began their long migration. Roz climbed to the top of the tree and watched as the flock slowly faded in to the horizon. There's another connection because right now all of the geese are migrating south. I kind of wish I was migrating south. I guess I will on fall break. Chapter 54, The Winter. The island was quiet. The migratory birds had all left, and the hibernators were asleep, and everyone else had begun their simple winter routines. Everyone but Roz. Now that she was alone, our robot didn't know what to do with herself. Sometimes she could hear her good friends the beavers going about their business beneath the ice, and she wondered when she would see them again. Roz stood there until snowflakes started drifting down from the sky. The flakes swirled in the breeze and slowly piled up on the ground and on the trees and on our robot. So she crouched into the nest, slid the stone door behind her, and sat in darkness. Hours, days, weeks went by without the robot moving. She had no need to move. She felt perfectly safe in the nest. And so, in her own way, our robot hibernated. Roz's body relaxed. Her quiet whirring slowly stopped. Her eyes faded to black. She could have spent centuries like that, hibernating in total darkness. But the robot's hibernation was suddenly interrupted when a shaft of sunlight fell upon her face and carried energy back to her empty battery. Roz's body tensed. Her quiet whirring slowly started. Her eyes began to glow. "Hello, I am Rosum, Unit 7134, but you may call me Roz," said the robot automatically. When all of her systems were up and running again, Roz noticed she was surrounded by broken branches and piles of snow. The roof of the nest had caved in, and the lodge was now flooded with sunlight. Roz felt more energized with each passing minute. But she also felt cold. Her joints felt stiff and brittle. So she got up and cleared a spot on the floor and made a fire. The snow inside the nest began to melt, and the robot's sensors began to fall. When she was ready, she climbed out through the hole in the roof and into a bright foreign landscape. The world had known was now covered in a thick layer of snow. Tree leaves went to the ground under heavy sleeves. The dark pond was now pure white. The only sound were Roz's own crunching footsteps. As the robot continued gathering wood, she found more victims of the cold. A frozen mouse, a frozen bird, a frozen deer. Had all of the animals frozen to death? No, not at all. There were a few fresh tracks in the snow. As we know, the wilderness is filled with beauty, but it's also filled with ugliness. And that winter was ugly. A devastating cold front had swept down from the north. There's Roz tracking through the snow. Maybe we'll get some snow this year. A devastating cold front had swept down from the north and brought dangerous temperatures and huge amounts of snow. The animals had prepared for winter, but nothing could have prepared the weaker ones for those long nights where the temperature plummeted and the wind whipped over the island. Roz turned to the nest, where the fire had melted the interior snow to a muddy soup. She took a minute to warm her body by the flames, and then she began the repairs. She patched up the hole in the dome with a lattice work of branches before adding a layer of mud. Soon the repairs were complete, but another snowfall might cave in the nest again. So Roz kept the fire going day and night to prevent the snow from building up on the roof. The robot brought in load after load of firewood, and each time she went outside, she was reminded of the frozen weasel and the mouse and the bird and the deer. How many other frozen animals were beneath the snow? Before going in for the night, she called out to whoever was listening. Animals of the island, you do not have to freeze. Join me in my lodge where it is safe and warm. Chapter 55, The Lodgers. Firelight spilled out from the nest and into the cold, blustery night. Roz sat inside and listened to the wind and the soft pops of crackling wood. But then soon she heard another sound, tiny footsteps crunching through the snow. Roz, I'm freezing. Can I join you by the fire, please? Said a weak voice. Into the light crawled our very own Chit Chat. The squirrel was shivering and clumps of ice had stuck to her fur. When she finally felt the heat of the fire, she collapsed. Roz picked her up off the floor and placed her on a warm stone and let her sleep. An hour later, there were more footsteps, and a family of rabbits shuffled into the nest. They huddled together in a corner without saying a word. Pinktail the possum was the next to arrive. Good evening, she mumbled, trying to act cheerful. It certainly has been chilly. Swooper the owl hobbled in, followed by some chickadees and a magpie. Fink knew a good thing when he saw it, and the fox lay down by the fire. Then came Dig Down the groundhog, and the fuzzy bandits carried in an old turtle named Crag, who was in the worst shape of all. Creatures who should have been hibernating deep underground had been roused by the vicious weather. Only the healthiest animals with the warmest homes were safe. More and more animals appeared, and slowly the lodge was filling up. This was the first time many of the lodgers had seen fire, and they gazed with a mixture of fear and hope. They could feel the fire's destructive power, but they could also feel its healing power as it warmed their bones. The lodgers seemed to push forward, eager to feel more warmth. It was important that the lodgers understood the fire, so Roz showed them how to build one. She showed the smaller animals how to arrange the kindling, and she showed the bigger animals how to arrange the logs. Bumpkin, Lumpkin, and Rumpkin struck the firestones together, and everyone chilled when they managed a spark. As Roz looked around, she saw moles curling up beside an owl, a mouse snuggling between two weasels, rabbits nestling against a badger. Never before had the robot seen prey and predators so close and peaceful. But how long could the peace possibly last? I propose a truce, said Roz, like the dawn truce. Everyone must agree not to hunt or harm one another while you're in my lodge. Very well, said Swooper. After consulting his carnivorous friends, we hunters will control ourselves. Then it is settled, said Roz. My home is a safe place for all. One by one, the lodgers each fell into a deep sleep. Even the nocturnal creatures, that were usually wide awake at the night, gave in to the coziness of the nest. The robot stood out of the way and quietly tended to the fire as her guests slept through the night. Only when daylight started creeping in did the lodgers finally begin to stir. You all are welcome to stay here as long as you like, said the robot. My home is your home. Thanks a lot, Roz. Fink carefully stepped over a rabbit and a woodpecker on his way to the door. I don't think I would have survived another night on my own. It's just too bad we can't cram a few more creatures in here. and the fox slipped outside. The robot looked down at the fur and feathers that now carpeted the floor. The nest had been completely full that night. If any more animals showed up, they'd be left out in the cold. But Roz was not about to let that happen. Chapter 56. The New Lodges. The second lodge would have to be bigger than the first if they were going to fit Broadfoot, the bull moose. He was a towering hulk of an animal and had a thick coat of fur. But even he was struggling with the frigid temperatures. Broadfoot lived on the other side of the pond in a dense sense of forest that was home to so many animals, most of whom were in desperate need of a good thaw. The winter days were short, so there was no time to waste. So rather than walking all the way around the pond, Roz tested its frozen surface to see if it was safe to cross. She threw a heavy rock high in the air and watched it bounce off the hard ice. Then she carefully walked on the ice where she found Broadfoot waiting for her. The moose quietly led the robot to the clearing in the trees where the new lodge would go. Then Roz made a fire. "Do not worry," said the robot. "You will all be warm soon, but I need your help." Roz asked the animals to collect anything useful they could find: large stones, strong branches, chunks of frozen mud. With the robot's building expertise and the small army of helpers, construction of the second lodge didn't take long. The animals happily agreed to the robot's truce, and they shuffled into the warm wooden dome. "If you keep the fire alive, it will keep you alive. But be careful, fire can turn deadly in an instant." At dawn, heavy snow was falling again, so everyone went to the third nest that Roz had built. She trudged into the great meadow where fierce winds had created enormous sweeping snowdrifts, but she powered through and finished the job, and soon started working on a fourth lodge, and then a fifth. The island became dotted with lodges that all glowed warmly through those long winter nights, and inside each one, animals laughed and shared stories, and they cheered their good friend Roz. Chapter 57. The Fire. Strange sounds were echoing from the far side of the pond. What started as a low murmur gradually swelled to a chorus of terrified voices. There was an eerie glow in that part of the forest, and a thick plume of smoke began rising from the snowy treetops. Raj charged across the ice and found the second lodge completely engulfed by a raging fire. Frightened animals were running in every direction, fleeing for their lives through the deep snow. "What happened?" shouted Roz as Broadfoot galloped wildly past. "We put too many logs in the fire pit," he said. "The flames climbed up to the ceiling." "My baby is in there!" cried a mother rabbit. "Somebody help, please!" Roz didn't hesitate. She plowed through the snow and ducked into the lodge. Flames and smoke were everywhere, and a tall stack of logs blazed in the fire pit, and in the far corner was a tiny ball of fur shaking with fear. Crouching low, the robot wound her way beneath the smoke and around the flames and gently scooped up the hair. "Do not worry," Roz yelled over the roar of the fire. "You're going to be okay." She turned to leave, but the doorway had started to crumble. So she shielded the air with her body and smashed right through the walls of the lodge. Sizzling pieces of wood went flying as the robot and the rabbit burst outside into the soft snow. "Oh, darling, you're all right," cried the mother rabbit, pulling her daughter close. "Roz, thank you for saving my baby." Now that everyone was safely away, the robot turned her attention to the fire. Her glowing eyes darted through as she computed a plan. Then, with all the strength in her legs, Roz launched herself high up into the branches of the nearest pine tree. A moment later, she was shaking violently the heaps of snow down from the branches. Steam hissed up through the smothering mound of snow. The flames quickly died, and within minutes, all that remained was the charred foundation of the lodge. Roz dropped from the tree and waited as the frightened animals slowly returned. Then she said to them, "Would you like another lodge?" The animals looked at one another, unsure of what to do. They were afraid of another fire breaking out, but they were far more afraid of the deadly cold. So they pulled together and worked with Roz and built a bigger, better lodge on top of the old one. It had a better ceiling, and it had important safety features. And they had a whole new respect for fire. The conversations. Thanks to Roz's truth, life inside the nest was mostly harmonious. But when the animals went outside, it was business as usual. Sometimes a lodger wouldn't return. Sometimes a lodger would return in the belly of another lodger. And as you can imagine, that made for some awkward moments. So when everyone was gathered around the fire, they tried to keep things pleasant by having conversations like these. I wonder what Brightbill is doing right now, said Chit Chat. And where is he? And who's he with? And you think he ever thinks about us here on the island? I'm sure he thinks about us, said Roz. I think about him all the time. I like to imagine that the geese had a fun flight to the wintering grounds, and Brightbill is floating on a lovely lake, eating yummy food and making wonderful new friends. But hopefully they're not too wonderful, because I'd like to stay his best friend if possible. That's a nice thought, said Roz, but I worry that the flock might have gotten caught in this icy weather. I do not think they would handle it well. Don't worry, I'm sure that they're just fine. Brightbill is such a great flyer, I just know he'll keep the flock out of trouble. He is a great flyer, said Roz, but I still worry. Life is short, Dig Down the groundhog was telling. It'll be lucky if I see the spring. Now, I don't want your pity. I've had a good run, but I tell you what, if I could do it all over again, I'd spend more time helping others. All I've ever done is dig tunnels. Some of them were real beauties, too, but they're all hidden underground, where they're no good to anyone but me. And they weren't even good to me this winter. Now, the beavers, they have it all figured out. They built that beautiful dam which created a lovely pond that made our lives better. That must feel mighty good. The beavers made our lives better in another way. They taught Roz how to build, said Fink. Ain't that the truth, said Dig Down. Roz, you must have saved half the island with these lodges, and to think we used to call you a monster. I'll repay my debt to you if it's the last thing I do. Your friendship is payment enough, said Roz. Oh, please, your sweetness is going to make me sick. There must be something we can do. Your friendship really is enough. Friends help each other, and I will need all the help I can get. My mind is strong, but my body will not last forever. I want to survive as long as possible, and to do that, I'll need the help of my friends. The animals listened quietly to Roz and thought of their own struggles to survive. Life in the wilderness was hard for everyone. There was no escaping that fact, but the robot had made their lives easier, and if ever they could, the animals would return the favor. I've seen 93 winters, far more than any of you, Crag the turtle said. And I can tell you that the winters have gotten colder, and the summers have gotten hotter, and the storms have gotten fiercer. I heard that the ocean has gotten higher, said Chit Chat, but I don't see how that could be true. I mean, where all that extra water come from? You are right, the ocean is higher, said Crag. My grandfather used to say long ago this island was not an island at all. It was a mountain surrounded by flatlands. Chit Chat's eyes grew wide with concern. If the ocean keeps rising, the island will be swallowed up by the waves, and I don't even know how to swim. If the waves ever do swallow this island, it will not happen for a very long time, said Crag. By then, we will all be dead, even me. Everything has a purpose, said Sweeper's turn to lecture the lodgers. The sun is meant to give light, plants are meant to grow, and we owls are meant to hunt. We mice are meant to hide. We raccoons are meant to scavenge. Roz, what are you meant to do? I do not believe I have a purpose. Ha! I disrespectfully agree, said Sweeper. Clearly, you're meant to build. I think Roz is meant to grow gardens. Roz is definitely meant to care for Brightbill. Perhaps I am simply meant to help others. This spring. This is our last chapter for today. Dripping water, flowing water, splashing water. Winter's blanket of snow and ice had finally begun to melt. White was fading away to expose the gray and browns that hid beneath. Little green buds were creeping all over. Crowds of bright flowers were rising up from the dirt, and soon the island would be bursting with the rich scents and colors. At long last, it was spring. The lodgers returned to their homes. The hibernators emerged from their secret places. Roz roamed across the island and checked in with the beavers and the bears and all the friends he had missed. Then the robot went home to work in the garden. After the bitterest winter anyone could recall, life was slowly returning to normal. However, it was a quiet spring. There were fewer insects buzzing, fewer birds singing, fewer rodents rustling. Many creatures had frozen to death over the winter, and as the last of the snow melted away, their corpses were slowly revealed. The wilderness really can be ugly sometimes, but that ugliness can make beauty. You see, those poor dead creatures returned to the earth. Their bodies nourished the soil, and they helped create the most dazzling spring bloom that the island had ever known. Hopefully, on Friday, we'll see Brightbill return to us. So, now you have a little exit ticket to do for me on what the chapters that we just read. And then I hope to see you all tomorrow.